Hi, I'm Hans Pregler, Technical Director at Young Auditorium. Since we have no events until further notice, I have the opportunity to show you how all the magic happens behind the curtain. Welcome to Backstage Perspectives. Join me as we explore what it takes to put the show on the road. We will look at dance, music, theater, children's programming, Broadway musicals, and more. On this episode of Backstage Perspectives, I will be talking about the basic operations of theatrical counterweight rigging and how we use this simple technology to make magic happen on stage. Find a comfy seat, because our next episode starts right now.
So anything that, as far as lights, curtains, any kind of flats that might be for a scene or backdrops, they're usually going to be attached to rigging. And rigging just is a fancy way of saying a bunch of hardware, a bunch of metal that's going to be used to attach theatrical elements like lighting and scenery and hold it up in the air. And if you're lucky enough, you'll have a location that will give you a fly house and a fly space, which is basically just a lot of room over top of what you see on the stage that will allow you to hide some of that. And that's where you can have a lot of fun, because you can have a 20-foot tall backdrop that can just magically disappear, or have an entire scene that can magically disappear. And all of that is flying up above what you can see from the audience. So rigging works sort of like a teeter-totter, where when we attach lighting to one side, we actually attach it to pipes, or what we call battens. And so we attach the lighting, we attach curtains, we attach scenery to these battens or pipes. And then on the other side of it, we have what's called an arbor. And the arbor is basically a carriage that holds weights. So if you add 10 pounds of scenery or 10 pounds of lights, you have to then go and add that same amount onto the arbor. For an electric, say an electric that has 30 lights on it, for an example, you might have to add 500-600 pounds of weight on the other side to counterbalance that. So in our example here, as a teeter-totter, they have to equal out each other. Otherwise, you have some poor stagehand that's trying to lift 400 or 500 pounds of lights, and it just won't happen. But if you can equal them out, now all of a sudden you can make this work. So we will take and bring in a batten. We'll add the elements to it, so that might be curtains or lighting, whatever it might be. Then we will send a couple stagehands up to what we call a weight rail. And a weight rail is a big metal walking surface. On the weight rail, we have about 20,000 pounds of weights. They come in two varieties. They come in 20-pound and 40-pound. So if we add, let's say, 500 pounds of lights, the two stagehands now have to add 500 pounds or thereabouts of weight, right? Obviously, it's not going to always work out to be right on the dot, but we get within 10, 15 pounds of where we're at, and now we have something that we can handle. So we have the arbor where the weights are held. To run that, to make that go up and down, there is a hand line that's attached to it, which is really just a thick rope that's meant to hold lots and lots of weight. Attached to the arbor as well are lines that run up to what we call a grid. And a grid is basically just a metal work surface that is also at 65 feet in the air. It can hold all of the weight of everything that we have in the show. It can hold hundreds of thousands of pounds of weight. So when we have the lines coming up to the grid, they go through a pulley, or what we call a head block, first. And the head block is basically a bunch of pulleys that are sandwiched together so that we have about 7 lines that run through them, and they're all connected into one unit, and they all spin together as one. Then those lines travel out to loft blocks. The loft blocks are also pulleys, but they're positioned right over top of where we want them to land on the stage. So for a batten at Young Auditorium, we have 7 lift lines per batten. And each one of those has a loft block up on the grid that aims it to the right spot. Those lift lines then travel down to the batten and connect with chain and some hardware, and that's how the whole system connects. When we go to operate the lift lines, we should have everything equaled out. So 500 pounds of lights, 500 pounds of weight. When we go to run it, there's a brake that holds it in place so it doesn't move when you don't want it to. The operator will disengage that brake, and then they will pull either on the back side or the front side of the rope. If you pull down on the back side of the rope, your batten's going to go up in the air. If you pull down on the front side of the rope, it's going to come back down. So if we have just added 500 pounds, the first thing that the operator on the floor is going to do is remove the brake, remove a dowel that we put into the rope as an extra safety, and then they're going to test the line. They're going to take it up in the air, they're going to make sure it weighs the right amount. When we're in show mode, things operate a little bit differently. If you were on stage while we're setting up, you're going to hear a lot of noise. You're going to hear people yelling up to the grid, to the people that are loading weight, saying, please add 200 pounds, please add 400 pounds. Line set 12 needs another 20 pounds, or whatever it might be. They're going to yell up there and they're going to be talking back and forth. So in a show, that would not work. What we end up doing is we use a couple different systems. Mainly, we're going to have those operators be on ClearComm, and they're going to be talking to the stage manager. And the stage manager is going to say something along the lines of, stand by rigging Q3, or something like that. In advance, we will have all of the cues for the show planned out on a piece of paper, who's going to do what, where they're going to be, how fast they're going to move, and when they're going to do it. So they know that when the stage manager says stand by rigging cue number 3, they need to be at line X, have it ready. So they're going to disengage the brake, have it ready to go. And when the stage manager says rigging cue 3, go, that line starts to move. And they'll know, if they're taking out the batten, in other words, taking it up into the sky, or they're bringing it in, meaning the batten's going to come back down to the floor. They're going to know how fast they're going to move. They're going to know when they need to stop. So then the question comes up, well, when do you know when to stop, right? So you know where stuff's supposed to go by what we call spike marks. Spike marks are used in a couple different ways in theater. Spike marks can be used on the floor. A lot of times, if you ever see a fancy scene change where people are running on with stuff and running off and it magically gets to where it's supposed to be every time, it's usually because of spike marks. Spike marks are basically just tape that are pieces of tape on the floor to show where things need to go. On the rail, it's sort of the same idea. Spike marks will be on the rope. So for our theater, we have green spike marks as the furthest down point, or the furthest point towards the floor for a batten, and blue spike marks, meaning the sky, as the highest point. So when that spike mark lines up with a stripe of paint along the back of the wall, then they know they've reached the point where they're supposed to be. So in our example, when the operator is bringing in the batten, they know that they're supposed to stop at a certain color of spike tape. Sometimes we have cues that run extremely fast, where you have 2-3 seconds for a batten to get out of the way and be where it's supposed to be. And then sometimes we have more graceful, gradual movements where we want it to look pretty. We want it to look like, this magic is happening in front of your eyes. So it really just depends on what's called for in the show. Naturally, anything to do with rigging, any time that you're suspending equipment over people's heads, it's going to be a dangerous situation. You should always be cognizant of what you're going to do, have a plan, have that plan checked, and know that you aren't going to cause any harm to yourself or others.
Thank you for watching today's episode. This program was made possible by Young Auditorium. We hope that you will support your local artists and local arts venues. If you would like to support Young Auditorium, please follow the link below. Also listed below are the links to the websites of today's guests. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share our content.